continue. Sorry for the.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Um,
So
yeah,
ruining the environments. That's something that I guess me as this is what separated me from not being a hardcore Magic reg and just popping in whenever I wanted to. So I always
yeah,
have fun.
sure.
So I might be like a very ideal demographic for you. Instead, I just never get mad.
All right. Well, that'd be nice if everybody could be in that space. Yeah.
But that's
Um,
just not true because some
right,
people like Brian Weissman take the game so seriously. So when they see
right,
cards like Library of Alexandria, he just gets like
right.
flaming mad. And then the
Yeah,
environment, like you guys see, if the attendance drops off, you
right,
guys, or no, we shouldn't say you guys. Wizards of the Coast made a mistake, but it's also a learning process, and then you just keep going back and forth until you
right.
know things get better.
Yeah, and a lot of the fun of being a game designer, especially when you're looking at kind of the big picture of like why do people spend more money, why do people drop out, why do people recruit their friends to play more of this fun set. Uh, it's so hard to actually measure the variables, right? Like if there's a uh, very famously overpowered card, but tournament attendance is going up, why is it different that year than when Clamp is good, right? And like there might be an answer to that, right? It might be, yes, that card's really powerful and it's famous for being powerful, but it's still fun to play. It's fun enough to play against it. Or the counterplay, I brought my sideboard and I actually feel like I can beat it, right? Like, is it, right? Counterplay is so important, right? It's a mistake we made many times at Wizards. I could talk about a lot of that too, where we even tried to add counterplay and failed for kind of unique reasons. But um, yeah, so why do some formats take a hit on attendance when others don't, even when the forums might be on fire and look the same, right? Like if you didn't know that the attendance was down or up, you might guess the same outcome for two of these years that have just complaining on the forums, and yet it's not true, right? And I think you see that a lot with uh, you see that a lot when there's a variety of decks that you can play that are legit. You see that, right? Okay, well, I want to keep playing. There's things I can do. It's not just one strategy. And I think one of the reasons this is such an important piece is when I go to Friday Night Magic and I'm going to play, 3 to 7 rounds. What's the variety of my opponents? I've got my own homebrew that's not very good, and maybe I expect to go 1-5. But did I face fairies 5 rounds in a row, which was not very common because that deck wasn't as popular as it was good. But Affinity, right? The Skull Clamp, at its worst, at its best, is you could easily face it 5 times in a row, right? Or in Hearthstone, I remember people complaining on stream. It's like I've literally faced Face Hunter, right? This is in the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Face Hunter 16 times in a row, and I doubt that's true. But anyways, they're saying that, and uh, it does kind of make you want to quit. It's like, okay, am I going to have the same experience every round against this thing I don't like, right? As opposed to, oh, I haven't faced Warlock, and here's Warlock. Oh, I haven't faced Shaman, here's Shaman, right? It feels so much better, even if there's problems with the balance, to just have a variety, right? And to feel like you can build a new deck, right? I think that's another key piece. It's like, can I try a new deck and have fun this week? Or do I have to play Affinity or Affinity Hate, which is sometimes true. And so some of the lessons that really help with that, making a healthy format, is having solid build-arounds that not only sell people on a new path, but are legit, right? Even if they're tier 2, you can go to a Friday Night Magic and have a winning record with them, right? And then also introducing counterplay that works. And so to work, there's two key ingredients two categories you could list that I didn't understand when I was working on Time Spiral, right? So I was pushing very hard for counterplay, but the ingredient that I didn't understand was it has to be obvious that it is the counterplay to the right thing, right? And so COP red is obvious. What's it good against? It's obvious what it's good against. It
Yeah.
actually says red in the name. It's terrible gameplay, and I think it's a very bad design. But Red Elemental Blast is a great example. Even though it stops blue stuff. It being like, hey, it's a 1-for-1. It's good against the best cards in the format. But it's not like, oh, you have 2 Red Elemental Blasts in your deck. I can't win because I'm playing blue. It's like, no, it's like Disenchant or anything else that's going to create a 1-for-1. So we did a design, Rift Sweeper. You probably don't know this card. But basically it said, when I enter the battlefield, put a card that's exiled, a card that's removed from the game on the bottom of its owner's deck. And so this was incredible against all the Suspend cards. There's a Suspend Lotus, a Suspend Ancestral. In other formats, the Suspend Eureka was a powerful card, right? Play all your cards from your hand. This card basically destroyed those cards by putting them on the bottom of the deck. But it didn't say on the card, destroy target Suspend card.
Yeah.
It said, put a card that's removed from the game. And when you play a Suspend card, you kind of put it next to your in-play stuff. So there's thousands of
That's
Magic
interesting.
players that didn't even consider them to be removed from the game, even though technically they said that on the card.
Yeah.
The Rift Sweeper was not showing up, except by the players that could realize
Yeah.
the somewhat obvious, right? Somewhat obvious implications of what it meant. This destroys their their suspended Black Lotus. So, so the mistake there was, not saying what it did, because you need the counterplay to be obvious to people for it to actually show up. And then on top of that, you need it to be good enough. Rift Sweeper was good enough. It wasn't great, but it was definitely good enough. But that's a mistake we made throughout the years, right? There was tons of different shatters in Mirrodin block, right, to destroy all these artifact lands and whatnot. But they were merely okay generally, right? There was some that people weren't playing that, once again, were indirect, that were phenomenal. But the ones that people were playing, the shatters, right, the 1-for-1, 2-for-1s, you'd still lose all the time to Affinity, because Affinity's sacking its artifacts to get, in response to get value. Right. So I think that's part of the disaster that year, was like, I put 16 shatters in my deck and still lost to Affinity. And it's like, yeah, it sucks, but that is how it works, right? Disciple, one of the key ingredients, wasn't an artifact, and it, you couldn't destroy it. But yeah, funny enough, that year also had one of the most powerful cards against Affinity was the March of the Machines, which was called, but it was in blue. What is March of the Machines, right? The original version was Titania's Song. So March of the Machines said all artifacts are now creatures with power toughness equal to their cost. All the lands are 0/0s and die instantly, and they can't play a new land and tap it for mana because it dies instantly, right? It was outrageously powerful. Got second place at Nationals that year. But you never saw it in deck lists except for people who are like in top 8s, right? So missing on the counterplay is a big problem. You see this in video games too, right? Tom Cadwell, you mentioned him earlier. It's a big part of his philosophy for League of Legends. Like, okay, your character's powerful, my character's powerful. What do? I have to stay out of range, or I can't go over your trap, or I need to get some detection, or, in team fights, your character's not as good, so I'm going to wait to engage you later. Whatever it is, right? You can probably come up with better examples, right? But having the key there is that not only is it true that there's counterplay, but the player's feeling like they have counterplay. Oh, sure, your guy's good, but I know what to do. Oh, sure, your deck's great, but I know what to put in my sideboard. I know what, to what to save my disenchant for, right? If people feel that way, they're just going to have a lot more fun playing Magic. And so having a healthy format, a lot of what we're talking about here is key. Yeah.
So what were probably like 5 card designs that you really, really enjoyed in your career?
Well, there are a few that I made. What are my favorites? Baneslayer I did not design, but I love Baneslayer. So Baneslayer is where and this kind of talks to something that we did in like the 7 years I was there, is how do you make creatures so good that they don't need to have spell effects and they can still be, secondary market value, high, and relevant to tournament Magic, right? And Baneslayer is a great example of this. It's actually the term that a lot of us use for this category card, which is, if it comes into play and gets destroyed by a terror, it did nothing other than be a 1-for-1, right? And often you're down on mana because a lot of cards that kill creatures don't cost 5 like Baneslayer does. But if it lives, it's really powerful. But the counterplay is there, right? And I love designs like that, right? When you can find one of those that's going to make it, I think you're making Magic a lot better. And so when we launched that card, it was like $50, $60. It was in the decks that were able to beat the power deck then, which was Jund, red, black, green. Because it turns out life gain and having first strike and flying was just incredible against that deck, because you could actually attack through. They didn't have a lot of flyers in that deck. Even though they were playing Terminates, and they had a lot of spin, which is, I forget the name of the mechanic, but when you reveal cards from the top of your deck until you find one that costs less and you can play for free.
Cascade,
yeah, thank you. It's called spin when Forsyth designed it. So they're cascading into these Terminates so they can kill Baneslayer a lot of the time. But when they don't, Baneslayer's super good against them. I love that counterplay and that interaction. So that's often some of my favorite designs, are finding space like that, as opposed to the other side of the coin, which is Mold Drifter. It's the 3-mana or 5-mana creature that draws you to. Yeah, you can cast it as arcane, as a draw 2 for 3 mana, or 5 mana you get the flyer. And then of course the Raise Deads and Animate Deads were really powerful with that card. Because you draw 2 again, it can come into play from anywhere and give you 2 cards. And so those cards I'm less excited about. I think you should have some of those, but all of my powers tied up in my battle, my enters the battlefield, my battle cry, my enter the battlefield, tend not to play as much like creatures as they do spells, which I think is just, Magic is better when creatures are a major part of it, right? And too many Magic formats have had creatures not matter, right? Jit kind of does this, even though it's an equipment. It's like, oh, what creature did you draw? Well, don't actually tell me because it doesn't matter. I've got right. I got Jit with 2 counters. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Unless you draw like some sort of 10/10 indestructible or something. So yeah, I like that. My first cool design that I ever made was all the way back in Ravnica. I have a few designs in Champions Block, but my coolest first design was Fireman Angel. I was about to say Baneslayer Angel. Fireman Angel. This is a
4/3 first strike.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while it's in play or in your graveyard, it gives you 1 life a turn.
Yeah.
And so just kind of a new space, right? There wasn't a lot of like, I'm active for a little minor effect in the graveyard. There's some downsides, right? It gets buried under other cards and you forget to trigger it. It's a pretty big downside.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the idea of, oh, it's a cool angel, it can win you the game, and even when you kill it, it's still active, right? Even when you kill it, I don't feel that bad. And then it also had, I think it was 9 mana, reanimate me from the graveyard. So it was a Phoenix Angel. Was kind of the story to it. Great art as well. Yeah, what else did I make? I made a lot of bad designs. I made
let's start with your. Oh, you made that thing?
Yeah, and when I say made, it's often like a brainstorm, discussion, etc. But you know, I was one of the designers of it.
You might get shot for claiming that one. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's a horrible design. Bridge from Below, some really bad designs.
I mean, there's I think there's a legendary weapon in Hearthstone that's kind of like Divining Top now or something. I don't know. Like the last set for Hearthstone's really approaching like Magic style, whereas like I feel like the earlier years are more like incremental and RNG change, which is kind of gave its identity. But then I think like last year or maybe in a couple of years, like some people were saying it's stale. I actually was tasked to design a DCG in which I tried to implement magic elements to the DCG, and it just like, I'm obviously biased, you know, like I find Magic more fun, but I play more Hearthstone because it's more convenient. And just like, maybe I don't have the experience, plus like, you know, obviously Wizards has been around, or Magic's been around for over 25 years now, and Hearthstone's in high development, so maybe I didn't hit my stride, so to say, but like they're definitely very different style designs, like Magic and Hearthstone. And they often get compared, but I find them to be like actually drastically, I don't know, within the same DCG genre. I feel like they're decently different games.
Yeah, you feel like you're playing a different game for sure. Yeah, I agree.
So it's back to the point for these Magic card designs, like when you're designing like Divining Top or Fireman Angel, it's like cool, and then, you know, when it hits the environment, then you kind of see how it plays out, and it's a different feel from whether you're the designer or you're the player. Excuse me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
is there a little letdown of like you're very proud of a design and then it turns out not to be popular, or something you didn't feel attached to becomes popular?
Yeah, but it's always learning. So the letdown isn't like, the letdown that like hurts the most is usually like set wide, right? The whole set as a whole is not being received well.
Got it.
Individual designs are like, oh, I thought they'd like this, but they don't. What am I learning is kind of the fun part, right? Like we're talking about Celestia and Guildmage. I was very excited about those, and was very surprised at how little value they have on the secondary market. You know, it's funny, right? Just such powerful cards.
But that's all ego, right? It's just like the value it has in the secondary market.
Well, that actually I think is a good measuring stick. Basically, I kind of touched on this before, but when you have a card that's not showing up in tournament decks, but it's $8 on the secondary market, that's incredible learning, because it's like, wow, there's a demand, right, that is not the tournament players, which usually are controlling the market. Right. You see this with like some rare slivers from Legions back in the day, right? There were $5 to $8 rares. They just were nowhere near good enough to be in tournaments.
Oh, right. I remember this, yeah.
Yeah. And some of the big lesson there is, you know, casual players who are not going to Friday Night Magic love slivers, right? Slivers are super popular, right? We kind of already knew that, but this was good verification. And then the other side of the coin, right, is this card is very powerful. It's showing up in tournaments, but it has a low secondary market value. And often what that implies is that the tournament players are able to buy this from the casual players at a very low price, because the casual players have no desire to keep it. So they're not, you know, haggling much, right? They're selling it to the game store wants to buy this for $1 from me, I'll sell it, right?
Sure.
That was actually true for me when I first started with multi-lands, right? All the casual
Oh
players
man.
like, I have islands and mountains. Why do I need volcanic islands, right? I still don't really answer that. And yeah, I remember trading my volcanic island for Jandor saddlebags, right? One of the worst in terms of power level rares of all time, right? This is like in my first week. But I was also excited when I opened Volcanic Island, not because I thought it was a good card, but I knew people wanted multi-lands. So I was so excited I was going to get to go to the game store and actually trade my card for something, because it was hard to trade when I was playing, basically when Revised was the new set, was the current set. So I didn't have cards the people who were playing Beta and Unlimited had. But anyways, yeah, so yeah, we're kind of talking about, designs, and yeah, like Vengevine, I was very proud of. I thought that was a cool, fair, powerful card. It comes back from the
I know what it is. It turned out to be too good. Is that right? Or
maybe
no?
in some format. It wasn't too good in that standard format. It was just very good.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I made a few cards that are part of combos. I always forget the name of this guy, but the black creature that removes all counters from a card. It didn't make him to be a combo piece, but he combos really well with the land that says remove whatever it is, a bunch of counters to make a 30/30.
Oh yeah. It's 2/1
Yep.
first strike,
Yeah.
and then it makes the land makes a 20/20 dude or something. Is that?
Yeah. That sounds
Okay.
right.
I don't remember. I need, like, that's the thing. It's just like it's funny because Magic used to be in all physical locations. So if I'm unable to
Right.
play, I could at least read online what's going on. So I definitely remember reading about that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, yeah, we'll touch on something later, because it's like, I'm, like I said, I might be like a kind of a dilettante ideal fan in a sense that for like Magic and Hearthstone, where I just don't complain. I just like, oh, this is what's going on, okay, whatever. But it's like
Right.
somebody in love with the game, I'd be like, this sucks, or like you lose like 50% of the tournament players for a session, where it's like then it starts hitting you pretty hard.
Right.
I was trying
Yeah.
to look through your
Yeah.
sets, like which ones, because you mentioned Invasion block and then Ravnica block, which were obviously multicolored. Like what do you have, like, specific cards in those blocks that you felt like really were the defining ones on top of the ones that we already mentioned?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm just thinking of Shadowmoor Eventide. I pitched a cycle that was basically well, two of the cycles I actually pitched. Didn't design all the cards that are in the cycle, but often that's how it starts. It's like, hey, here's an example of a cycle, and here's some designs that may or may not make it into the final game. But the what were they called? The guys that are hybrid, like at the green-white one, pumped all your green guys by +1/+1 and pumped all your white guys by +1/+1. They're kind of like Tolsimir from Ravnica. There's a whole cycle of them that would pump the two colors they are. They're hybrid mana. And they had some cool, unique ability as well. Like the dragon reanimated all copies of him when you played him from your hand. So they could kill the first one. Now the second one's going to be 2 dragons. The third one's going to be 3 dragons. And of course, that comboed a lot like we're talking about with Kakusho. And then, yeah, what else did I make in that set? Yeah, I did a lot of design on on Shadowmoor, and then I was the lead for Eventide. Eventide's one of my regrets. That set could have been a lot better. If I could go back in time, I could make it a lot better. I wonder if they'll let me do that. And yeah, my most proud sets that I got to be a part of are, as a lead, was Dissension, the third set in original Ravnica.
Green.
Then,
I remember green blue being really strong in draft.
yeah. A lot of +1/+1 counters.
Also, just like a 3/3 trample of flyer for 4 that's common. What were the other ones? There were like even the uncommons and rares were like ridiculous and
Yeah. What were they? I'm kind of forgetting, but it's a long time ago. And then one of my most proud sets that I got to be a significant part of was Zendikar. I wasn't a lead on it, but I was like I was saying earlier, the liaison. So I was on the initial and final design team. And yeah, we were so excited. That team was really synergizing. It was Graham Hopkins, Mark Rosewater.
I have the Google open now, so it's Vampire. Huh?
Yeah. I was going to try to the other person. I have a space in my head. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
I have the Google open for Zendikar, so it has the card you mentioned, Vampire Hexmage, which is half of
Right.
the counter combo. Also, Iona Shield of Emeria.
Love it. Yeah. Did not design that
Uh,
one. Love it.
Ooh, I forgot about this one. Bloodghast.
Oh, which one's Bloodghast?
The vampire, it's recursion.
Okay.
Where you sacrifice it, I think, and then it just
Right.
comes back. And then Halo Hunter, I don't remember this one. A demon that kills angels.
Yeah, and then I remember loving I forget the name of it. The enchantment that says whenever you gain life, your opponent loses that much life. Greg Marks made that card. Big fan of that design.
Oh,
If you said the name of it.
Vortex? Something Vortex?
Oh, maybe I don't know the name. If it is Vortex, I forgot it. But
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the brutal thing about Magic is like there's just so many cards over the years. Like I
Yeah.
only remember the ones that I participate in. So for you guys who are heavily involved, it's just like this like entire infinite library.
I used to have the Encyclopedia of Magic in my head, right, when there was just 12 years. But now it's really hard for me, especially the sets I worked on, because I forget what we shipped. Like I'll remember a card, and then I'll be like, well, did we ship it that way, or did we change it before we shipped it? It's also the problem with names, right? The name was something for the whole time I played the card. The name was something different, right? And then when we shipped it, it gets the name. But yeah, so Zendikar was exciting. So we had the idea that lands matter, right? So that's what Rosewater had been talking about for years and years and years, right? And so Zendikar was going to be the set that was lands matter, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight, right? It's like, oh, this key ingredient to Magic, how do you amplify it? How do you make it matter in new ways? How do you make it fun to draw land even when you already have 10, right? Et cetera, which Zendikar did a great job of. That said, I used to make fun of Rosewater every time we were in the pit, right, to where R&D is, and he said, oh, we're going to make a lands matter set. I would try to tease him. I would be like, oh, finally a Magic set where lands matter. They haven't mattered this whole time. We're finally going to have them matter. But they already mattered. But we started off with, oh, what if, right, it's logical how we got here. What if your lands that are extra, you can discard them for cool effects, right? And there's been a few cards like that throughout history. They're decent designs, right? But it turns out it's way more fun just to play the land, not have to make a bad decision, right? Especially when you want to, kicker or trigger multiple cards at the same time. It's a way better mechanic, right? So now I can have 3 landfall cards in play, draw a land, and go, ooh, all 3 of this guy makes a 5/5, and this guy gets bigger, and this guy gets bigger. And it turns out it's just really, really fun, right? And it's great for draft, where like, draft often it comes down to, oh, I drew 3 lands and couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to Zendikar, where it's like I drew 3 lands and he couldn't keep up sometimes, right? It's really cool. It also lets you do more expensive, X spells or kicker or whatever you want to do, right? Stuff that needs a lot of mana. You can help justify that 19th or 20th land in your deck, right? Because I got all this landfall, right? So just the new kind of puzzle to solve for deck builders and drafters. So I love the set for those reasons. The theming, I think, was better than I ever expected, right? This adventure world, right? What does the art come out to be? I think we made a mistake with the Adventurers. Is that what they were called? I kept pushing for a new version of Slivers that I called Super Slivers. We decided not to do that. We did Adventurers. I feel like they're called something else. But anyways, they're guys who help each other when you get multiple of them. They play fun in draft, but I don't think they were a great mechanic. But a lot of the themes, the way vampires played, they need their opponent to be at 10 or less life. I think it's a great top-down and great incentives while you're playing. I'll make a bad attack just to get you down to 9, so that my cards turn on is a great, that's cool how it mixes those up.
Right.
Yeah, I think the set is a masterpiece. And, and we also had a lot of splash in ways that, got people excited that weren't necessarily pushing it over the limits. Lotus Cobra, if you know this one, it's the 2-mana 2/1 green guy. Whenever you play a land, add a mana of any color to your mana pool. And there were the fetch lands, right? The sack lands. So you could go 2 lands in a single turn, right? Or you could like keep a fetch land in play, turn 4, play Lotus Cobra, play another fetch land, sack them both, right? And do something that costs whatever, however much mana that is. Yeah. 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. And so, but that card I think is only a 9 or an 8. I think it was overestimated how actually powerful it was. But it's great that everybody's freaking out about it. When also sometimes you play it on turn 2 and they kill it because it's a 2/1.
Right.
Right. So the counterplay was there, at least most of the time, and so the upside downside was there. Yeah. So why is that set a masterpiece? I think there's a lot to learn from that. Flavor wise, I think the first mega hit with flavor after I left, the 2 mega hits with flavor actually after I left, Innistrad. I love that set, right? I wasn't around when they were making that set, but just the dark theme, the way the mechanics synergize with those dark themes. I don't know if you know this set, but it's kind of horror world, right?
I
Uh,
yeah, I didn't play it. Like it definitely was not
yeah,
active. Yeah.
spooky, 17th, 18th century, werewolves and vampires and ghosts and uh, which is great, right? They found that synergy of like these mechanics make sense with the top down, and just cards are playing in new cool ways, right? They brought back flashback that played really well in that set, self milling. Uh, yeah, love it.
So a big topic between old school and I guess contemporary Magic players is the effect of planeswalkers.
Yeah,
Any comment of that, being somebody who started
yeah,
Magic from the very beginning?
yeah. So I was around when we were making planeswalkers. The big people who I would say had the most input, like are the responsible for what planeswalkers are today, are Brady Domermuth, Aaron Forsyth, and Mark Rosewater. Um, but I like to think I had a meaningful contribution. I was pitching that the ultimates, right, the last ability,
Yeah.
be over the top but not consistent, right, which I think is a winning recipe. And then of course balancing them. I think we hit amazing balance that first time out of the gates uh, in Lorwyn, which otherwise I think is a miss of a set. But yeah, I think Lorwyn's a good example of like these can be very powerful. They can hit that space of if you don't deal with me, I'm going to generate meaningful value over time. But the counterplay to me is great, right? I think that was a big part of what Aaron Forsyth had pushed for, right? It's they're attackable, right? Core mechanics in the game, like Lightning Bolt and 2/2 flyers, are good against them sometimes, right? I think the mistakes with planeswalkers, the planeswalkers at their worst when it comes to balance and lack of counterplay, are when the first turn is the most powerful turn by far, or the counterplay to them is not very good. Like planeswalkers that, like Elspeth was the first one that did this, that I'm not a huge fan of, is like she creates her own blocker, right? So she's 4 mana, goes +1, make a token. Is that right? So she right away is protecting herself while threatening to be good, in the future. Like a Wrath of God goes off after her, and now suddenly you can't catch up and kill it with creatures, right? Um, so I think there's good ways to do. I think Planeswalkers is definitely an A+ mechanic if you look at the best designs. I think the problems are significant, right? Oko being maybe the worst, but even Jace the Mind Sculptor, was kind of a mistake. Not as big as I think other Planeswalkers. It has more fame maybe for being a mistake. Maybe Oko's taken that that title, but yeah, when done right, I think Planeswalkers are a fantastic mechanic, and mostly because they contain that splashy excitement, right? -7, destroy my opponent's hand, -8, destroy other lands, right? These things that don't happen but 3% of the time, but are still written on the card and get you excited and create different incentives, right? I have a different puzzle to solve. When a Johnny is about to destroy all my lands, I might have to make a different attack or, tutor for or raise dead a card that deals 3 to him, even though it's not going to kill him. It's the only out I have to not get LD'd, right? It changes the way you play, which I think is fantastic. And then, like I said, just the core mechanic being they have a life total where almost every card in Magic can interact with it is fantastic. So I love Planeswalkers. I think people that think that they were a mistake to design could not be more wrong. Oh my gosh. So one of the ways I like to measure claims, right, is if we go back in time and we spawn 2 universes and you get the difference in revenue, which world do you want? Do you want to go back to Lorwyn, right, and get the difference in revenue for Magic, right, has Planeswalkers versus doesn't? And it's just, I can't imagine it being even a close to tough challenge, right? I think Planeswalkers have added so much excitement and created so many sales that you'd be crazy if you wanted the difference the other way in revenue.
So most of my participation in Magic jumping in is always during the block constructed or in draft, because I don't have to study. I just
Sure.
like look at the sets. So the Lorwyn block was Garrick and Lilandra and Chandra. Is that correct?
Yana Chandra, yeah, Jace, and a Johnny.
So
Yep.
I, in many blocks, have found inefficiencies that I perform well. Like I get a top 8, but there's only like 1 or 2 tournaments. But the discoveries I made aren't really publicized. So
Okay.
that fairies block,
Yeah.
I played in the PTQ. I got top 8 in that one too. It was fairies, shaman, and elementals, and some people did like some white weenie kind of thing and some elves kind of thing. I played shaman. I found an inefficiency in the elementals block, which was they are very weak against planeswalkers. So we had Garrick and Chandra in the sideboard because they
Gotcha.
only played one thing a turn. So once you have Chandra, they lose.
Right. Sure.
or even Garrick, because they like as soon as they play their one thing, you just kill it and then
Right.
they lose. So one of the things that got me to top 8 was anytime I played against elementals, we knew to sideboard in planeswalkers, and then for the elves and the elves and the white weenie deck, we had Fury Stoked Giant as the sideboard.
Which one's that?
It's a 3/3 for 5. All your creatures get tap deal 2 damage to whatever, a target. So you could finish them off, or you could just like wipe their board by playing Fury Stoked Giant. And it had like when it dies, it comes back as like with the -1/-1 counter or something. I don't know. It's like there were a lot of inefficiencies that I discovered in like block decks that just never saw the light of day.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's
is,
interesting. Had you been a named player, yeah, what would have?
Yeah, had I spent more time, or just like, I know Brian Weissman obviously had quite, some interest in me, like developing me too. Another one was like Invasion block. I did the Twilight's Call. Do you remember that one?
No, tell me again. What's that?
It's Living Death, except it doesn't switch.
Oh, of
it
course.
Just brings,
oh, yes.
So
you name a creature type, right?
I think.
Or no, am I thinking of the wrong one? Oh, Twilight's Call is the
everything back from your graveyard and put into play.
Okay.
So that block, I think I either made top 8 or top 16 in a massive field.
Okay, yes. I think straight up return everything from both graveyards. I see. Yes.
So the inefficiency was that block, there was like Ravenous Rats, there was Valdalian Merchant, which was a 1/2, and Probe and Factor Fiction. So you just like stall, and then just like, and then EOT, what's it called? EOT, Twilight's Call with Kicker.
Because it's an instant when you kick it, right?
Yeah. And then that turn you just kill him.
Yeah. That's cool. I didn't even know about that deck. That is cool. Yeah.
You could like, if you search for me in all these blocks, like I top 8'd in a lot of these things, but I'm only playing like 1 or 2 tournaments.
Right.
So
that's very cool.
And one I talked about with the Brian Weissman podcast is the Rebels block. Like I literally was not gonna play in these tournaments. In the morning of, I woke up at like 8 a.m. and just at match play. So one of the inefficiencies was Ramosian Rally. Like Massacre was in the set, so Massacre obviously wipes the Rebels. Rebels were popular, so I had Diving Griffins and Ramosian Rally, because you don't need to. You could just like tap an untapped creature to cast Ramosian Rally.
And that was the protection, or was that the +1/+2? I forget what that was.
+1/+1, because the protection one doesn't stop Massacre. That was
a
big problem.
Right.
So I like when people played Massacre, I just like tap a Steadfast Guard or Diving Griffin, Ramosian Rally, and then just like they just lose. Right. Or if my opponent had the protection for all creatures one, and I had Ramosian Rally, it bounces, because we play our own things and then it just counteracts. But if we're both playing Rebels and you attack into me and I just like block Ramosian Rally, I wipe your board.
Right. Yeah.
So I just like, I don't know, maybe I should have tried harder, but I just like, so low time, and it was definitely more of a dilettante interest. And then same thing with the Type 1 tournament I played. I told Brian Weissman about this. I had him critique the deck I played, which was, it had like Duresses, like all counter spells, and just like Shadow Mage Infiltrators and Hypnotic Specters. So with the Moxes, like you turn 1, you could Duress, and then turn 2, get the thing and just like go to town.
If they don't deal with it, it's just GG.
Yeah, so it just depends on like obviously the format. This was the good thing about Magic. I mean, once you see what the format is, you could try to find inefficiencies and just like, see what you could do.
It's fun. It is so fun. Yeah.
There's so I guess like for me on the card games, it's more of a third person's point of view.
Sure.
And then for the real time games, it's like I'm in the first person point of view, and you know how it is. Like when you're in the first person point of view, you take all the majority of the brunt of the negative aspects of the industry.
Oh, sure.
So it's hard for me to appreciate like the real time games from my point of view, which is like when like you or other people bring out like the Starcraft stuff. Like I unfortunately only remember a lot of the negative memories of like
Interesting.
dealing with community, or you know how it is as a competitive gamer. You mostly remember the games you lose, not the ones
Right.
you win.
Right. Yeah, your brain just replays them over and over, right? Because you want to get better, I guess is the reasoning, right? Why our brains work that way. But yeah,
Yes. So that like you know, I definitely remember playing against Finkel, and I played against I just don't remember what happened, but I do remember a lot of the community imbalance whining, which like you know Jay Sears and I we just randomed. So, but eventually the game got too competitive that you know you just can't do that
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah. Yep, I used to play random a lot.
Do you
Can't
have
come close to doing that now. I'm pure Terran in StarCraft 2.
do you have any real time strategy stories, StarCraft stories you want to reminisce to the public?
Oh, yeah, mine's a pretty short list. I mean, it was fun winning that tournament at PAX. Yeah, it's funny. I have the replay of that final game. So I'm facing a guy who's definitely better than me, right? Like he should have beat me for sure. And there's a moment in game two, he's up 1-0. In game two, he comes in, and I've expanded, I forget the name of that map, but basically I've expanded the low ground, and he is destroying me with his stalkers, right? I just wasn't ready. And I send all my SCVs, and I have one tank behind them, and I kind of chase him off. And then I go back to mining, and I've got this one tank, and he had whatever, right? Six stalkers. And you watch in the replay, you just see him walk all the way back to his base with me having one unit. And then I, of course, get to 5 tanks, right?
And
And
then
go on to win the game. And then I win game 3. And it's just like, not only should I have lost to him in general, but what does he think if he watches this replay? He had me dead to rights, right? And so, yeah, I feel very lucky that he decided to run away. Uh, but yeah, not super great stories. Yeah, my StarCraft experience is like I said, it's kind of in the tier 2 space. You know, I have my few claims to fame that are pretty minor. I won a keyboard once. Uh, Actually, I guess winning the tournament packs, I got 2 $400 graphics cards. That's pretty cool. That's something. Um,
it's almost the legacy, like the fact that you could
uh,
Google something is probably the you know the
sure, yeah,
lasting legacy,
it's
I
written
guess.
down. Yeah, and but yeah, a lot of my StarCraft experience is just being a fan. I mean, I love watching it. I still load up the replays, and well, I guess now it's the streams, and yeah, I just love it, man. StarCraft is my second favorite game after Magic. Magic's clearly number one, but yeah, very soft spot in my heart. It was fun for StarCraft. A lot of the StarCraft designers were basketball friends once I started working at Blizzard, so you know it's fun to chat with them, and, go to lunch dates with you know the different guys that
Name
worked
drop
on.
them.
Well, I'm forgetting his name. Who was the famous for being balanced guy for StarCraft 2 for a long time?
Oh, I guess I didn't know stuff about StarCraft 2. Actually, something happened to me during the era, which I told Brian off air that
Okay.
you know I'm not ready to publicize yet, but I was going through some pretty bad times. StarCraft 2's beta actually helped me because it gave me a goal, and
Okay.
like I got to number one in the sub ladder of the beta, and just like yeah, so stuff happened to me, and I just had to get back to real life. But it the beta helped an integral portion of that recovery.
Yeah.
So. But
Right on.
yeah, it's just yeah mainly StarCraft and the StarCraft Brood War. I was like the first 2 years like I gave it my all like content creation wise and competitor, and then at the end of the second year, I had to figure out what to do, I guess, in life. And you know, a lot of us did go to game design, but one of the motivations for this podcast is I don't know if you know like Jimmy Kimmel and Joe Rogan, like you know sometimes or just you know through shade at gamers.
Oh, sure. I didn't
Um,
know that, but yeah, I believe it.
yeah. Oh, okay. Didn't know. Like Brian Weissman knew about it, so he you know gave some scathing responses to that about how irresponsible and ignorant it was.
And who did you say? Jimmy Kimmel and who else?
Jimmy Kimmel and Joe Rogan.
Okay.
So I was
Yeah.
gonna do this podcast
Yeah.
anyway, but one of the Jimmy Kimmel just like a little bit throwing shade. Then he got like 2 gamers on a show to like talk about the experience, and it just like it was so difficult for them because I felt like those two felt similarly to me, whereas like I really like Jimmy Kimmel and Joe Rogan, and for them just like many other people,
Right.
at least in my life, I don't know if what happened with you and Brian, uh, kind of like threw shade at the industry. It just like it makes me, my defense mechanism now is to just to put up a wall and just be like,
Okay. Sure.
because like I don't, there's some people, and you see this with poker a lot, or gaming, they say you should respect my industry, you should respect my industry, which is like that's just a losing battle. Like if
Sure.
they don't feel that way, they don't feel that way. There's a lot of industries that I don't understand, that you can't, I don't disrespect them, but you can't force me to be interested.
Right. Right. Right.
It's just like yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, no, go ahead and finish. Yeah.
Every industry is difficult, so
Yeah.
like in that sense, it's like, as you said, for if a game's popular, or a movie's popular, or a song's popular, it's the world is the judge, not the individual.
Right. Which is hard to be in that brain space sometimes. Yeah. This is reminding me of was it Ebert from Siskel and Ebert saying that games aren't art, right? You know, he's a reviewer of movies that had a lot of notoriety, especially when I was younger. Um, yeah, it hurts me a little bit, like to be like, you know, I kind of feel like, well, you guys don't know. You just don't know what it actually is. Also, of course, games are art. What does that even mean? You know, so such nonsense. But yeah, who was I watching? Anyways, yeah, I see shade get thrown. You know, like there's the Family Guy where, you know, the nerds when they die, I forget exactly what it was. When they die, they're playing Magic online on the computers in heaven. Super nerdy, right? Magic's arguably more nerdy than D&D, right? But the world is changing. It's way less nerdy now. My experience is different than the average Magic player, right? Because especially when I cared more, right? Like in 18, 19, 20, 21, you know, those years. If I said I'm a Magic player to somebody I'm on the plane with, and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" Right? I know it's gonna be really nerdy, but of course I get to say, "And I just won $25,000 yesterday." You know what I mean? Like it was easy for me to get out of that.
As a
Kind of like
competitor.
I'm a nerdy player, right? And yeah, embarrassment for it has always been there, but not as much as other people, I'd say. Like I remember my cool friends in school saying, "Man, you got to stop talking about games in school." I'm like, no, dude, I have to talk about games. I have to talk about games. Yeah, it's funny. It's making me remember, you know, the captain of the soccer team. Like, you know, he was the best wrestler in school, or maybe second best wrestler in school. You know, he played D&D and Magic with me, right? But don't tell people. Don't tell the girls. Uh, funny, funny. He's a cool dude. But yeah, I mean, it really is. They just don't know. They also make fun of everything, so it's hard to get too upset, right? They'll make fun of anything because it's their job. There's a bit more dismissiveness in it when they talk about gamers, and we don't have, you know, as much defense, right? As like if you make fun of theater people, well, they're interviewing theater people all the time, and you know, there's a different level of defense and notoriety for the mainstream with people who are into, you know, making movies and whatnot, obviously. But yeah, I don't think it should get us too down, and it's gonna be very different in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's just gonna keep changing, right? Because the more we have childhoods, right, the higher percentage of kids that have a childhood where it's like my fondest memories are this game or that game. It's just going to be harder to be dismissive of it when the whole population is like, actually, I played Minecraft more than I, you know, read books or watched TV when I was a kid. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like when we grew up, the internet was commercialized when we were teenagers, and I think at least you, me, Brian Weissman, and a few other generation, we just like knew the world would never be the same. This was a international phenomenon in human phenomenon of the human race, where like when internet becomes common, like when you grow up starting like and become sentient at say 5 years old, and you have access to this thing, you're going to be spending more time in front of a computer or on the internet rather than physical interactions, which we really see right now. People who don't have enough physical interactions in person are really suffering from because it just takes time. Like you learn. So the environment becomes more toxic. Like when you don't have the threat of somebody in front of you just gonna punch you in the face if you say something wrong. Or just like you see somebody visibly upset, and that's really taking its toll.
Yes.
On the internet. I don't know
You're
this solution. Sorry.
the guilt is not there when I don't see your face and I'm insulting you on the internet, right? Yeah, it's too bad. And I think parenting is a part of this, right? My parents, of course, never told me how to behave on the internet because it didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
We had Usenet, we had D'Angelo's rulings for Magic the Gathering when I was probably 20-ish, right, is when that started to be a thing. But I think parenting is a big piece of this. Something else I'm thinking about is, yes, it's nerdy. The things I do are super nerdy and not mainstream, even though they make more money than the movies do. And that will change. But something else that's beautiful, and I feel very proud that I get to be a game designer, right, is just how many people, even without COVID, are, stuck at home, right, for whatever reason, right, just for different issues, that get to suddenly have a great life, right? World of Warcraft is probably one of the best examples of this. How many people have a social, rewarding, relationship now with 1 to 50 people, right? Because World of Warcraft exists, and it would be very difficult for them to have that without it, right? Turns out there's a lot more people than people think, right? Because you don't see them at Taco Bell because they can't go to Taco Bell, right? For whatever reason. So I think that's something to be proud of as people in the game industry, like what we're bringing, what the value we're creating for able and non people, right? We bring a lot of happiness to a lot of people. I know it was true for me, right? Like I was nerdy, but not, suffering from the same amount of nerdiness as some people in my school, but I was nerdy. I was embarrassed. I was shy. When Magic hit, my life got way better. I mean, it was just way better, right? Now suddenly I have a group of friends that have a shared common interest. There's more than 20 of them, and I'm going to go hang out with them every Tuesday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And then sometimes, when there's a tournament on Wednesday. Similar experience when I went to work at Wizards, right? These people are super smart, smarter than me, that I get to learn from, right? All these PhD, MIT, Harvard guys, right? That their passions overlap with me, and I'm going to get to learn from them, right? It's a similar experience when, you're a 14-year-old right now, and you go onto a Discord server and you chat with people who also like Magic or Minecraft or whatever, right? Like it's just so much better than having a bad time in high school, is to have friends that care about the same thing you do, and you're creating real bonds, and games really do that for a lot of us more than anything else possibly can. That's awesome, right? So Jimmy Kimmel is wrong.
Joe Rogan was, also throwing shade, but we're throwing them under the bus when it's more like my position is just be the people that we needed when we were teenagers. So like if people are like 12 years old or 18 years old now, and you really love games, if you're an elite competitor or tier 2, whatever, tier 3, you could do a lot of good things. You just don't know it yet. There's going to be some rough times because there's some realities like money,
right?
Competition, but just like if you keep at it and explore your skill sets and bring value to the world, you're gonna do well. I don't want to mention some people's net worths or like game designers, but like you, Brian Weissman, John Sasso, Roger Vier, Dennis Fong, Jay Severson, they all did really well, and that's in your future if you figure out what to do in your era.
Right. And I think that's totally true, and that's exciting. And it's crazy, by the way. I think there should be a book written about this. But if you go back and say, okay, here we are, here's the top 20 to 30 people with presence on the scene for Magic in those first 2 years, let's say, right? Or the year before, and then after PT1, after the first Pro Tour. How successful were all those guys? And the list has got to be just way ahead of like the top, the average for the graduating year at Harvard, right? Maybe not the top 20 guys from Harvard, but you know what I mean? Because some of those are already guaranteed to have, the $1 million paths in front of them. But it's outrageous, right? Pakula, Finkel, Weissman, right? There's so many people that have so much money and so much success. It's amazing, but it was predictable. In hindsight, you could say, hey, if you're pulling ahead, right? Because it was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who were smart competing for these slots. And Finkel got it every single time, right? Weissman got it every single time, right? Weissman has 3 top 8s in those first 2 years, right? Even after becoming the most famous Magic player. So yeah, that's amazing to me. And I think part of the message too is, you and I are very competitive, but there's also just such a big win for people who are, not trying to be tier 3, tier 2, or tier 1, right? It's
As long as you're
friendship.
bringing value, yeah. As long as
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
bringing value, have
right,
friendships, you're committing
right.
to something. It's
Hanging
like,
out with people who you laugh with, right? Like if this person that you've just met tonight at Friday Night Magic is going to be your friend in 20 years, it's hard to imagine what more value you're creating together than that, right? So, uh, you know, yeah, the hate out there, I hope, is getting easier and easier to ignore, right? I think it was a lot harder when I was a kid,
yeah.
and today with the internet and just game stores existing, which didn't exist when I was essentially when I was 17. They came into being basically when Magic hit. Uh, it's just so much easier to just find like-minded people, which is part of, I think, the key to life, right? Just find people you have a good time with and aren't gonna hate you for your wearing out of style clothes or whatever it is that I got hated for. You know what I mean?
So one thing that you mentioned about like Harvard, and say Stanford's like these are world class universities, obviously the top in the nation by
Yeah.
default. Like these are not necessarily international competitions, whereas like these games, whether it's Magic or Starcraft, these competitions are at the world level.
Uh,
So to compare, if you're a world class person in any industry that already exceeds like these university requirements, so to say, and the universities are changing now because I think the UC system's more looking out towards extracurricular activities that aren't checklists. So just
okay.
like when I applied to college, I don't know how much weight being a StarCraft world champion did, but definitely they would be open to it now. But the
That's
thing
interesting.
is, that's the thing is like, it doesn't really affect my career. Obviously, it looks better if I go to Stanford or Harvard, but I am who I am. I'm like, it's not there. It's more like, in fact, being Asian, it causes more civil war than anything, which is the
Hmm.
college stuff. But as for like performance wise, I don't. At least in my network, I don't think anyone has any doubts or issues that I could do stuff. But I think that
Yeah.
there's something to be said of like if you can compete at an international or national level in any industry, that's gonna be
Oh yeah.
more indicative than a college degree or even a graduate degree.
Right. Yeah. I mean, certainly, like Mike Donay hiring for the balance team, right, for the final design team on Hearthstone. It's not like let's read through your college degree. Let's read through your right. It's oh, you were best in the world at Warcraft team battles. Well, hey,
Yeah.
and you play a lot of Hearthstone, or just internally, right? Like people who won the internal tournaments at Blizzard. It's like those are probably the people you should be hiring to actually work on Hearthstone full time, right? And they're great, right? That team was phenomenal.
Do you remember Derek Sakamoto?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I worked with him at Gamers like 20 years ago. So
yeah, yeah. He's a key piece to why Hearthstone is what it is, right? Just the look and feel and the vibe and the aesthetics, right? Him. I kind of see. There's a few of them there, right? That are in this space of like they don't see the competitive game the same way I do, right? I am kind of forever stuck in that competitive mode. I've talked a lot about how I've learned more than that, but I'm always going to be in that mind space. But Derek is not. Eric Dodds is not. Right? Ben Brode really isn't. He can be, but he's kind of on a different level. And then Ben Thompson, who's for a long time was the lead kind of art director there, I guess is what his title was. They all think of it from the more of the like, what is my experience? What is the story? What am I seeing? Right? What am I feeling? And I think those guys together are why Hearthstone just
blue.
blew it out, right? Like it's just amazing what they accomplished, and taught that, like I said earlier, and taught the world that you should all love DCGs, right? Card games are the best, and Hearthstone really taught that to a lot of people that didn't know that.
Yeah,
Paved the way for a lot of these other like deck building games and roguelike deck building games, right? I think those are a lot more popular because of Hearthstone, for sure.
yeah. I mean, one limitation that Magic had was the physical world, and the barrier to entry was just like
Right.
pretty
So,
big. Whereas
yeah.
Hearthstone's freemium, here, just
Right.
try this out and then see if you're
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah, so many barriers to Magic. That's actually a lot of what I worked on while I was at Wizards is the kind of what is the new player experience, right? And if you want to be negative, if you want to be blunt, the new player experience is, hi, your friends are going to tell you how expensive the game is. They're going to tell you not to get the newbie stuff, right? and they're going to explain the game bad to you, but it's still way better than not having a friend that plays Magic. Because if you don't have a friend that plays Magic, how in the world do you learn Magic?
Yeah.
Right? So we're trying to solve that, and it turns out Duels was, way better. Duels of the Planeswalkers, one of the first good digital offerings, was way better than all the paper products that you could put in front of people. But yeah, like you said, that's not in front of Hearthstone, right? Hearthstone looks like a game you can play right away. The tutorial was A plus. The fact that you didn't need to, let alone have an account once they started doing headless accounts, but didn't need to spend any money, right? It's just amazing how much easier it is to get into. Magic, you kind of need somebody telling you, you got to play, you got to play, you got to play, right? There's some of us that just go, oh, I heard about it, and you're in. But yeah, a lot of Magic success is just friends holding your hand and forcing you to get through all those outrageous barriers. It's ridiculous, right? My deck costs $750. It's like, well, I don't want to play a game where a deck costs $750.
Yeah, that's rough time. So do you think they, clearly Wizards has done better?
Oh yeah.
Dealing with these situations, but it kind of does have a natural barrier to entry, and
Yeah.
What's your future like for games? Just this upcoming project, unannounced project?
Yeah, we're not too secretive, but we haven't really announced it yet. But yeah, that's my future right now. It's been so fun. I'm doing a lot more of the business side, which is not super fun, but it's neat that I'm doing it for the first time. But it's more work than fun. And yeah, it was amazing, just kind of like going, okay, what does it take to make a video game? Haven't really worked on the production side, haven't worked on the technical side. So the fact that we ever actually have a team where we have a Unity build that you can load up through Steam, it's private, of course, still, but it just kind of blows my mind, right? Like, we've got an amazing VFX artist, Ruben, who is, making effects that I'm like, this could be in Hearthstone. It looks that good, So I am so excited right now, and I think the game is super fun. And yeah, it's interesting too. Like, what do you target, right? So we're targeting, like I said before, auto battlers are awesome. I like Battlegrounds way more than I like the other auto battlers because I'm just baffled by the other auto battlers. The feedback loop is just so much harder to work your own way through, right? You kind of got to cheat and look on the internet. But I think there's more complexity. So most of my career has been, how do you reduce complexity and find the kind of core of the fun? I think going the other way here is better, right? I want to add more dimensions to the auto battler, right? I want it to be a deeper game with a bit more complexity that hopefully means its replayability is, quite high. So we'll see. But yeah, and then the fun flavor, like I was talking about before, we're doing, we have a fire mage in our game who is Cinderella, right? So she looks cool. She's a princess. So our game is very focused on the storybook vibe, right? There's good and evil characters. There's princes and princesses, right? There's a frog prince who's the lonely prince, and he's looking out the castle window like this. He's all sad. And if you can find a princess for him to kiss, just meaning you have a princess on your team, he turns into the battle-ready frog. So he's got his awesome bastard sword and his armor on, and yeah. So we're trying to find that really fun flavor that I think adults and younger people can enjoy. And it also gives us a lot of fun top downs, right? Like I was saying, the frog prince who wants to turn back into the frog gives us a lot of top down fun space, meeting people's expectations, right? Because Hans Christian Andersen, Brothers Grimm, so we're pulling a lot from kind of public access, awesome characters, and then twisting them in our own way so that they're ours, right? And that's a ton of fun. So it's something I never thought I would do. It's actually a funny part of working on Hearthstone. I was always math mechanics, right? That's what I came into the game being when I first started working on Magic. And so now I write art descriptions. I get to work with the artists, which I love. We have so many amazing artists that we're basically working through with contract work and do voiceover. So when I first started Blizzard, they're like, okay, yeah, initial lead this set, and want you to write the art descriptions and the lines for the characters to say, and then go to the recording booth in LA to record all the lines. And I'm like, this sounds amazing. I've never done it, but it sounds amazing. And I had a ton of fun with it. I think I did a decent job, but it's definitely the most fun I've had working in a company, is going and meeting famous people who are recording the lines for these games, right? Voice actors who did cartoons and other video games. So when I hear their voice, I know who they are, but I don't know them by face, right? Tons of people coming in like that.
Did you get Peter Cullen?
I'm not sure.
It's Optimus Prime.
Okay, no. No, we didn't. So we were limited in like who we had access to, although he's probably part of the guild. But yeah, we right when I started working, it changed to just people who were in the union. So it's a lot of like people who work with Disney and like Jim Cummings, who does a ton of voices in Infinite cartoons, doing voices for us. Yeah, but it was it was just a ton of fun, man. I loved it. Really cool. And so I'm doing that on our game, and that's what's so fun is like, can we do this as a small team with a indie budget? Can we make something that's like competitive? We'll see, but it's fun to try.
I mean, Mr. Weissman did it, right?
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah,
any...
they beat Diablo 3. I mean, honestly, right? They beat Diablo 3. That's insane.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, the genre of like Diablo and Path of Exile isn't mine, but like when I log on Twitch and I see Path of Exile on the top, I'm like, oh, that's Brian Weissman's game.
Yeah.
It's got a more personal attachment. I'm rooting for it more so from a
nice. I like
relationship point of view versus the actual game. Do you have any words for, just the game industry out there, or aspiring gamers? This was
aspiring gamers, aspiring game designers.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically to game designers, people want to be in game design. Make your own games. So when we looked at resumes, which by the way, when you put out a job opening for Hearthstone, it even surprised the HR people at Blizzard how many people applied, right?
Sure.
Right, because even more so than World of Warcraft, even though World of Warcraft is bigger over time, has been a bigger game. People want to design these types of games, Hearthstone. So when we see resumes, a lot of what we're looking for is what have you done on your own? What experience do you have, right? Especially if people don't have industry experience. Make your own game and then understand what you're doing right and wrong with it. Do play tests, right? So put it in front of people to get honest feedback. Learn how to do a play test, right? So a big mistake a lot of newbie designers make is explaining the game, telling people why their feedback is wrong or right? And the right way to do it is just to listen. Say, hey, what happened in your game, right? Try to frame questions that just get them to talk about the game, to talk about what's happening. And then it's your job not to discuss it with them necessarily, but to measure it, right? Okay, this person was really upset about X, Y, and Z, or they loved X, Y, and Z. Why is that? Why are 9 people all saying their favorite part was this thing I didn't think was very good? What did I miss? Right? Do I have enough data? Right? Do I need to go play test with another 10 people or not? And if you're part of being a good game designer is the art of getting feedback, and never discourage anybody that you know or that you work with from giving you feedback. Right? That's another big piece of this is make them feel like their feedback is valued, because it is, right? It should be. You should be properly expressing how important it is that they give you their feedback. Because even when you disagree with it or you think it's wrong or you think they're going to be unique, it's still something that's worth thinking about for at least some. Why did this person say that, right? You don't want to just go, I disagree and I don't want to think about it. Why is this person, even if it's the only person who's going to say that specific feedback, why are they saying it? And then also know that you're always going to be surprised, right? Sometimes you are certain this card's going to be fun or not fun or whatever, and you're going to be surprised, right? Something we did that's super helpful, this is a great way to get a lot of feedback in a quick amount of time, is just go through card sets with people who worked at Blizzard. So we schedule about 7 of these where we bring in people who are varying degrees of experience with Hearthstone. We'd sit them on the couch in our kind of big theater room, and then whoever was the lead, I'd go, hey, welcome. Thank you guys for doing a set kind of feedback session with us. We're going to show you the set. We're going to put the cards up there. We just kind of want you guys are friends or you know each other. I want you to talk amongst yourselves, kind of talk about the game. You'll see some designers in the shadows in the back of the room. Ignore them. They're just here to listen and learn. And then I, unfortunately, kind of have to be a jerk. I can't answer very many questions. So you guys kind of want to work through them on your own. And then the value is for us listening to you guys. So please talk out loud. Please be mean if you need to be mean, right? Pretend we aren't here. And if you like something, that's great too. But just be honest and kind of give them that setup. And it was hard because they always ask questions anyways. But trying to just guide them through and then get feedback, right? And we just go through what the current state of the file was and hear their thoughts, right? And a lot of the value is not on balance, because unless you have somebody who's very good at a game, balanced feedback is not very good. But opinion on balance is still valuable. Oh, casual players think this card is powerful. You got to check that, right? Okay, that's interesting. And then, is it too confusing, right? One of our big goals, that I wish Wizards would do a better job of this, is do cards basically have one read and you get the gist of it or not, right? Do we need to change the wording, or is the idea just too rough? And being willing to change things, right? To come out of a meeting like that, or with anybody who's giving you feedback and go, this thing I thought was good, I'm wondering if we need to take it out of the game, right? So, and you can do this, right? It turns out this is free, right? I'm talking a long time about this question, but if I'm just a aspiring game designer who's 25 and I made my own board game, I have friends who will definitely be excited to try out my game and give me feedback. So you should do that. You should do it frequently and learn how to take that feedback. What action are you doing? Because believing that the key is acting on feedback to get a better game, if you can believe that because it's true, you're going to be a better game designer. And then when you interview for jobs, if you can talk about, well, I made these games and here's what I learned and here's what I did wrong and here's what I did right, you are going to stand way ahead of other people who also don't have literal industry experience. This is a way to get ahead. Yeah.
Invaluable feedback and advice.
Right on.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. And
yeah, man, this was fun. Thank you.
Let me know when your game launches. I'll definitely do some runs for
Can't wait. Yeah, I'd be so curious to hear your feedback on the topic of feedback.
Yeah, I'll test that too.
Cool.
All right, Matt Place, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, thanks. Later.
Later.